But when we do not have love, compassion, and a feeling of brotherhood, which are all byproducts of wisdom as self knowledge, then power is used destructively. 65% of all the scientific research being done currently is directly or indirectly meant for developing weapons and is supported by the defense ministry in every nation. In the last century, several million people have been killed in wars, which is without any such example in any previous century. Now, next question is, does humanity have the capacity to handle the knowledge which science is generating? Are we not like children playing with fire? Look around you. For without wisdom, might we not set the whole house on fire and burn ourselves? There's hatred in our motivations. We are badly divided into groups: caste, national, linguistic, religious, and other groups. We have been at war for thousands of years, and we now have nuclear weapons, making war a million times more disastrous. Is the new knowledge taking us in right direction? Remember the Hiroshima Nagasaki disaster, and also the gas leak at Vishakhapatnam. Does it not give you goosebumps or make you angry on science and development? Through genetic engineering, we might develop new power, and can we ensure that we will use that power for the benefit of mankind? All the nations of the world are spending huge amounts in developing scientific knowledge as if that is our priority. Do you know Einstein, the great scientist Albert Einstein, regretted the fact that his equation E is equal to mc square, which stated a great truth about nature, that mass is just another form of energy, led to the development of atomic bombs that killed large number of people in Japan. So why do science? We must distinguish between science and technology. Science is the quest for truth about nature. Do you understand? Science means we are trying to find out the truth about nature. Its aim is not to produce technology, but to understand how nature works and discover the order and intelligence operating around us. Science is the quest for truth about nature. Its aim is not to produce technology, but to understand how nature works and discover the order and intelligence operating around us. If nature were chaotic, if on releasing a stone sometimes went down and sometimes up, then there would be no science. But definite causes produces definite effects, and that is why science is possible. The science does not create order. He merely, and that is why science is possible. The scientist does not create order, he merely studies it. Newton only discovered gravitation, which existed a million years before him and will exist a million years after him. Isaac Newton, you all are familiar about him. He is known for his laws on gravitation and motion, and he wasn't interested in the lessons being taught in school. He was more interested in studying how the world works. One day he was sitting under a tree when he saw an apple fall to the ground, and he wanted to know, why did the apple fall from the tree? What makes things fall? Can anything stop things from falling? Are the sun, moon, and the stars going to hit the ground ever? Newton spent many years answering these questions by thinking and doing experiments. He later on formulated the law of universal gravitation. Similarly, if I talk about Faraday, Faraday was the scientist who discovered electromagnetism. It was thought that electricity and magnetism were two completely separate things. But he discovered that if you push a magnet towards a loop of metallic wire, a current is generated in it, as shown by the deflection of a galvanometer. This you studied in class 10, if you remember. He was very excited about this new discovery. After he demonstrated this in a big hall, somebody asked him, "All this is very well, but of what use is this discovery?" And he replied, "It's a newborn child. Of what use is a newborn child?" Today we know that this particular discovery made it possible to have electric lights and fans, motor cars, aeroplanes, and so on. But that was not the reason why Faraday discovered electromagnetism. He was just studying nature. He just wanted to know how nature works, and he wanted to discover the order and intelligence operating around it. Students, now is the time to get inspired from the great stories of these scientists. First is to think patiently. Once Albert Einstein said, "If I have done the public any service, it is due to my patient thought." We don't spend enough time patiently thinking. It's not that I'm so smart. It is just that I stay with problems longer. Students, listen. If you would just block out some time daily to think, you could solve many of your problems. You could even solve some of the world's problems. Second component is labor to be tactful. See, tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. We can all polish up on our discretion, our delicacy, and our risks. We build too many walls and not enough bridges. The quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. This is why you must spend your time building bridges instead of walls. When we build bridges, we are literally building a better life. When we build walls, we are stagnating our own growth. We all know people are lonely because they build walls instead of bridges. Days after knowledge, we already discovered. There is no need to recreate the wheel. To make progress, all you must do is to build on what others have already done. Commence by learning what others know. When you chase after knowledge, you strategically position yourself on the shoulder of giants. You are then able to see what others can't see. Next is pursue truth. We must pursue truth. The truth is heavy, therefore few care to carry it. Be one of those few who pursue truth both night and day. Blaise Pascal, the great physicist, said, "Once your soul has been enlarged by truth, it can never return to its original size." See, science is the systematic enterprise of gathering knowledge about the universe and organizing and condensing that knowledge into testable laws and theories. It's a simple step by step process that can guide you to an answer on how much water you plants need to flourish, what kind of exercise program will deliver the best results, or even whether or not the contentious assertion you just heard during a political debate is grounded in evidence. The scientific method is a process for experimentation that is used to explore observations and answer questions. See, this is the scientific methodology. Firstly, to ask a question, to background research, construct a hypothesis, test your hypothesis by doing an experiment, analyze your data and draw a conclusion, and then report your result. Now the question comes, does this mean all scientists follow exactly this process? No. Some areas of science can be more easily tested than others. For example, scientists studying how stars change as they age or how dinosaurs digested their food cannot be fast forward a star's life by a million years or run medical exams on feeding dinosaurs to test their hypothesis. Can they feed dinosaurs? No. So when direct experimentation is not possible, scientists modify the scientific method. In fact, there are probably as many versions of the scientific method as there are scientists. But even when modified, the goal remains the same. That is to discover cause and effect relationships by asking questions, carefully gathering and examining the evidence, and seeing if all the available information can be combined into a logical answer. Even though we show the scientific method as a series of steps, keep in mind that new information or thinking might cause a scientist to back up and repeat steps at any point during the process. More than the prescribed scientific method, a right kind of attitude has driven all the major discoveries and inventions in the world. Students, what you need to take away from this is that the right attitude will bring you success in life. Although we are talking about right kind of attitude in science, but this applies exactly in every aspect of your life and your career. Whether you are doing a science fair project, a classroom activity, independent research in finance or in politics, or any other hands-on science inquiry, understanding the steps of scientific method will help you focus your ability to question and work through your observations and data to answer the questions as well as possible. Now, these are the different objectives of developing the right attitude to excel in any field you choose in your life. We'll be learning the importance of having these virtues through the various phenomena taking place around us and the lives of illustrious people. An argument that makes science distinctive is what makes a scientific attitude as the cornerstone, is its emphasis on evidence and scientists' willingness to change theories on the basis of new evidence. You must have read in everyday newspapers that attacks on science have become commonplace. The history of science is littered with theories that were scientific but turned out to be wrong. The scientific attitude reveals why even a failed theory can help us to understand what is special about science. I would like to give an example here. Like in class 9, you learned about failed atomic models of J.J. Thomson, Rutherford, and Niels Bohr. Though failed, but each model helped to take a next step in learning about actual atomic model. So these failed theories, these wrong scientific theories, are also of great significance for all of us. Let's start with the first objective, that is belief. A scientist believes that everything that happens in this world has a cause or reason. In ancient times, objects in the night sky conjured superstition and were associated with God and religion. But misunderstandings about meteors lasted longer than they did about most other celestial objects. Meteorites were long ago thought to be cast down as gift from angels. Others thought the gods were displaying their anger. As late as the 17th century, in thunderstorms. In 1807, a fireball exploded over Connecticut, and several meteorites rained down. By then, the first handful of asteroids had been discovered, and a new theory emerged suggesting meteorites were broken bits of asteroids or other planets. Meteor shower occur when dust or particles from asteroids or comets enter Earth's atmosphere at very high speed. When they hit the atmosphere, meteors rub against air particles and create friction, heating the meteors. The heat vaporizes most meteors, creating what we call shooting stars. Today, we all know this without any doubt or superstition. But in the earlier time, in ancient time, people had all kinds of superstitions associated with them. You know, the largest meteorite recovered in the United States fell in a wheat field in southern Nebraska in 1948. And people, they saw a giant fireball in the afternoon. It was found buried 10 feet in the ground, and it weighed approximately 2,300 pounds. The most pure crater, it is in Arizona, and it is huge. So today we know a lot about meteors, and we are free of any kind of superstition or misbelief. Next is curiosity, to know more A scientist shows interest and pays particular attention to objects or events. He asks questions and seeks answers. Faraday was one of four children, all of whom barely had enough to eat. He could not get his formal education in school because his teachers were not able to recognize his abilities. So one very fine day, his mother decided that he would leave public education forever. At the age of 13, he got a job in bookbinding shop, reading every book on which he worked. He developed special interest in science, particularly in electricity and magnetism. Faraday, this is his picture. He soon turned his home into a lab, teaching himself the fundamentals of chemistry and physics. In one of his experiments, he fashioned a crude electrostatic generator using old bottles and pieces of wood. This great scientist, this visionary scientist, received his big break when Sir Humphrey Davy, one of the greatest scientific minds of the time, invited him to lecture on chemicals. Faraday was so moved by the experience that he made a bound copy of his notes and had them delivered to Davy in the hope of securing employment. Eventually, Faraday was hired as a laboratory assistant and learned chemistry at the side of one of the greatest scientists of the era. Taking full advantage of the break he had been given, he impressed Davy and his staff with his eager yet humble manner, and Faraday's career began to flourish. So you can see here, through his innovative experiments, he could make his place in the world of science. And why it was so? Because he was curious to know about the things. Next is objectivity. Einstein and the scientists like him, they are very objective, that they do not follow their feelings and biases to influence their recordings of observations, interpretation of data, and formulation of conclusions. Einstein and the quantum reveals for the first time the full significance of Albert Einstein's contribution to quantum theory. He famously rejected quantum mechanics, observing that God does not play dice. His analysis of quantum mechanics opened a whole range of applications, including quantum teleportation and quantum cryptography, but he wasn't completely convinced by the theory of quantum mechanics. And that story is as fascinating as the theory he attempted to nail down. You know, quantum mechanics, it implies that a particle such as an electron can pass through two holes at the same time. More famously, German physicist Erwin Schrödinger's equations. Science students, they must have heard about him. His equations proved that a cat would end up in a peculiar sort of quantum state, being neither dead nor alive. None of this impressed Einstein. He believed quantum mechanics was correct, but desperately wanted to find a way to complete quantum mechanics, so it made sense. So the best form of objectivity lies in identifying preferences so that their influences can be recognized and countermanded. Next is open-mindedness. A scientist listens to and respects the idea of others. He accepts criticism and changes his mind if reliable evidence contradicts his belief. You all know about telescope. It is one of humankind's most important inventions. It's a simple device that made faraway things look near. When curious people, they pointed the telescope towards the sky, our view of Earth and our place in the universe changes forever. So the first person to apply for a patent for a telescope was a Dutch eyeglass maker. His name was Hans Lippershey. In 1608, Lippershey laid claim to a device that could magnify objects 3 times. His telescope had a concave eyepiece aligned with a concave objective lens. When Galileo got wind of this device in 1609, he promptly set about making his own version of the same. Once he had done that and improved upon it for good measure, he tilted it skywards. He observed the sky and he observed craters in the moon, discovered 4 of Jupiter's moons, and provided evidence for the heliocentric model. Heliocentric model means that sun is the center of solar system. Actually, earlier, scientists used to believe geocentrism, that is, all celestial bodies orbit around Earth. Astronomical changes after that were just around the corner. So clearly, scientific observation is not merely a matter of passive receptivity on the part of man, it implies a highly complex activity. Towards of other people, should be receptive towards criticism. We should be able to change our belief if reliable evidence comes our way. A scientist bases suggestions and conclusions on evidences. When in doubt, he questions the veracity of a statement in relation to the evidence presented. Please switch off your video. Yasha Uja. No, Chanchal. Where's this? A scientist can do critical assessment of results and limitations. This enables a scientist to come up with new concepts which lead to discoveries that traditional scientists have overlooked. You have learned this in bio chapter in heredity and evolution in class 10 about homologous organs. You know the bones of whale because they are homologous organs. The organs which have the same fundamental structure but are different in functions are called homologous organs. These organs follow the same basic plane of organization during their development. But when the organism becomes adult, these organs are modified to perform different functions as an adaptation to different environment. The homologous structures are a result of divergent evolution. As this indicates common ancestry. So a scientist has to do critical assessment of results and limitations, and this enables him to come up with new concepts which lead to discoveries that traditional scientists have overlooked. A scientist, he expresses his opinions and tries new ideas even at the risk of failure or criticism. He should be able to take risk. You must have learned this in history also sometime, that during most of the 16th and 17th centuries, the Catholic Church hated scientists who formed theories the church deemed heretical and forbade people from reading any book on those subjects by placing the books on the index of prohibited books. A type of war between science and religion was in play, but there would be more casualties on the side of science. If you have read about Copernicus and Galileo in history, there were two scientists who printed books that later become banned. Copernicus faced no persecution when he was alive because he died shortly after publishing his book. Galileo, on the other hand, was tried by the Inquisition after his book was published. You must be knowing, both the scientists, they had the same theory that the earth revolved around the sun. We now know that this theory is true, but at that time, the church disapproved of this theory because the Holy Scriptures state that the earth is at the center, not the sun. As I was talking just now about geocentric model. As the contents of the Bible were taken literally, the publishing of these books proved to the church that Copernicus and Galileo were sinners. They preached through their writing that the Bible was wrong, and Galileo was punished for this offense. But he took the risk and stated that the earth revolved around the sun, and reverse is not true. Inventiveness, that is, a scientist can generate new and original ideas. Edwin H. Land, he invented, developed, and manufactured the Polaroid camera and Polaroid films. He was responsible for many photography-related inventions, like inexpensive filters that polarize light, his Retinix theory for color vision, and his practical system for in-camera instant photos. His open curiosity, creative ideas, energetic drive, and engineering insights led this researcher and inventor to develop new means to polarize photonic light and also a new theory of color vision. His Polaroid instant camera, which went on sale in late 1948, made it possible for a picture to be taken and developed in just 60 seconds or even less. A scientist is humble when he admits that there may be better ideas and realizes that there are individuals whom he may have to consult to arrive at correct observations and conclusions. Of course, all subjects attract a range of skills. But almost unique to mathematics are a handful of extreme outliers who are so good, it seems they are deploying some form of magic. The best known genius of this type was Srinivasa Ramanujan. Born in 1887, Ramanujan was an Indian student who lived in obscurity in the town of Kumbakonam in the state of Tamil Nadu. Bestowed with remarkable analytical skills, by the age of 13 only, he had devised his own scheme for computing the digits of pi. Pi, you all know, it is the value is 3.14. That is still in use today. By the age of 23, Ramanujan was convinced he was making important new discoveries in mathematics and was enterprising enough to write a letter to the eminent Cambridge professor of mathematics, G.H. Hardy. It was very much possible that Hardy could have shrugged aside this letter from an unknown student in faraway Madras. But to his great credit, Hardy recognized a touch of pure genius in Ramanujan's theorems, many of which were highly unusual in their form and betrayed an extraordinary originality. And Hardy, he invited Ramanujan to England. And this, although most of Ramanujan's theorems were merely stated as fact with no formal proof accompanying them, it was almost as if the young Indian had plucked the results ready-made from some abstract mathematical forms and relationships. When Hardy replied asking about proofs, Ramanujan was coy, saying he had his own unusual methods. You know, the story of the number 1729 goes back to 1918, when Indian mathematician Ramanujan lay sick in a clinic near London, and G.H. Hardy paid him a visit. Hardy said that he had arrived in taxi number 1729 and described this number as rather a dull one. Then Ramanujan replied to that saying, "No, Hardy, it is a very interesting number. It is the smallest number expressible as the sum of two cubes in two different ways." Next is perseverance, the ability to continue work in spite of many obstacles. One is determined to see that one's work is finished. We all know about Edison. He rose from humble beginnings, the last of 7 sons and daughters, born to a school teacher and an exiled Canadian activist in Ohio. So he was a persistent worker, and he was able to discover the bulb after 1,000 unsuccessful attempts. Next, we'll talk about intellectual honesty. We'll be discussing more about this in the next class. Till then, thanks a lot. Stay safe, stay happy.